Hello, this is Dr. Kathleen Rosenblatt, and I have the honor of interviewing Richard T. Bear. And Richard T. Bear is quite the pianist. And because I'm writing a book about music right now, which I'm calling Youth Planet, the 60s in the Music Century, the events, escapades, and issues wrapped in music. And it's pretty comprehensive, and I'm bringing it up to today, not just the 60s, because I start with 1900, but I'm trying to show all the strands of music through these decades to the 50s, the beginning of the teenager, and then the 60s, and then into the 70s, which was a really flowering of the 60s, and then up to today. Like, where are we today with music? How many different kinds of strands of music have developed since then? And how much is classic rock and the music of the 60s still more alive than ever? And here we have someone who has gone through it all. We're about the same age, and we've been through it all. We've seen all this growth and this flowering of music. And so Richard T. Bear is a pianist, and he's had quite a career already, and he's still going strong. But he has played with Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Pat Benatar, and Richie Havens, and the Blues Brothers, and he's been there and seen it all. And he's going to have a lot of good stories, but we really want to know him. So Richard, thank you for coming here.
It's an honor to be here with you, and I looking forward to this time with you, and I love the fact that you're diving deep back into the '60s, because that's kind of when I got interested in music. I was born in New York City, raised in the Caribbean, so I heard a lot of Latin in Puerto Rico, and in Haiti, a lot of rah-rah music, which is Creole music, and then back into the New York area. My parents had a house in just outside the city in Yonkers, and I would get on my bike and I would ride down to the village and grab a new record that came out. And
what a fertile area to be, the Caribbean and New York City.
It was great. It was great. And I got to tell you, I'd go into the record store and I looked at the album covers because I didn't know who was who yet. And the guy that ran the record store was great. He'd take a record out, put it on the turntable, play it for me. And every week I'd go home with a new record. And I'd buy, Muddy Waters. I'd buy, Rolling Stones. I'd buy a Beatle record. And because the Beatles had just broken, and I watched them on Ed Sullivan, and with the rest of America, and I was caught up in the British craze. And
what years were you in the Caribbean?
I was in the Caribbean in the late '50s into the early '60s, and my parents used to take me, even as a kid. They'd take me to the nightclubs, and I'd hear all these amazing Cuban bands, that came and played in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And, I loved it. And in Haiti, I learned how to play percussion because everybody had a stick and they'd bang on something. Mm-hmm. And, that was my introduction to music. It was like, you felt it.
I'm so envious because to grow up in the Caribbean, especially then, just the best music I find came from the Caribbean in a way. I love Latin music, but somehow that melding of the Caribbean with Brazilian and with, Mexican. And just the other day, I spent 2 weeks in Tulum recently, and it was the Cuban band that really knocked my socks off. And I was just sitting there watching them, taping them on my phone. They were so good. And the way they filled every second with rhythm. I couldn't believe that these 3 guys, or maybe 4, were producing that much rhythm. It was so thick. And
there was a band and they played a lot at the Hilton Hotel, the Caribe Hilton, in their nightclub, and they were called Los Chevaliers de España. And it was like this 11, 12 piece band, and everybody just was on fire, Wow. And I remember that as a kid, and then later on in my life, Ry Cooder
I love. I was just playing him yesterday.
The Buena Vista Social Club.
Yeah.
Was my Bible for a while. You know, that music, and in fact, I took a big chunk of the Buena Vista Social Club and wrote a song on this album, which is the newest album out. It's called The Way of the World, and the song is called Dinner for One, and it's total Buena Vista Social Club. I mean, it's all the lyrics are from the 40s, 50s. You know, they're not current modern lyrics at all. So that was my DNA. You know, that was my DNA.
It really comes out in
Creole
your music.
and Creole music, which was a bit of Latin, a bit of mento, which is prior to reggae, calypso, mento, reggae. You know,
Miss Mento.
yeah, mento.
I remember calypso and calypso. You remember calypso?
Yeah.
Whatever that was, cha-cha and calypso together.
Then I'd come back. You know, then I came back, and you know, then I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to play in a band, and my parents bought me a keyboard. And in my first band, I had I took some piano lessons when I was 8 or 9, and then my first band was, I think I was 12 years old, and played at the bar mitzvah. You know, so I had a band then.
What a great way to start.
Yeah.
So, and it all came together at that moment when it was so, fertile, when everything was just popping in New York. And
I'll tell you what, it was the best time, the late 60s, early 70s. Nobody today would forget about it. I feel so bad for everybody today.
Well, they're trying to relive it.
They're not reliving shit today. I'm telling you, not a bit.
Well, there are segments. There's some.
I don't know what words I can use in this interview, but.
Yeah.
But
my kids just love Jimmy Page, and they love the Doors.
Okay.
And they love Prince.
Here's a Jimmy Page story. I'm working at Manny's Music on West 48th Street. I'm about 16, 17 years old. And I'd work down there on the weekends because I go to school. And I remember one time a bunch of roadies came in, and they were all British roadies. And they gave everybody passes to the Fillmore East. And then there was another band that was playing there that night called Iron Butterfly. And they were the headliners.
Well, I just saw about 3 weeks
ago. They were the headliners. So
None of them were alive.
I didn't know who these Brits were, but I knew who Iron Butterfly was. And they had a big song called Inagata Davida.
Yeah.
Right, which really meant in the garden, Davida. That's how it came about. And because I'm a keyboard player, and they had an 11-minute solo, I wanted to see this, So I go down there to see Iron Butterfly. But there's an opening act. And so I'm watching, I'm waiting, and a guy comes out and says, please, for the second appearance in the United States, please welcome a new band from the UK, Led Zeppelin.
Jeez.
That's how I got to see Jimmy Page and the boys. They opened for Iron Butterfly. And Iron Butterfly shouldn't have come on after that because it was the best rock and roll set I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was over when they were done.
Well, just about 3 weeks ago was this concert at the Warner Center, and it was called People for a New America. So it was a whole day thing, and I was one of the speakers in the beginning talking about spirituality, but I talk about it from a very physical point of view, being an acupuncturist. And so I was there early in the day. Well, the very first band to go on was Iron Butterfly, and we hardly had an audience yet, but they were there. So then I was interviewing them backstage, and I was at Iron Butterfly in 1969. None of them were. It was so funny. And it was my first experience of a light show. And I don't know what, someone gave me something, because people were, it was at a small place. They were just starting out. It was like at a Moose Club or something like that, Moose Hall. And so people were on the floor, and it was like, wow, it was just so amazing to me at the time. But none of these guys were part of the band. They were all came in later. Even with the oldsters came in like in the 80s or the 90s. So it was very
yeah,
funny
but
that I'm
I think
telling them
about
about
10
it.
years ago they approached me to join the band and I didn't do it. But yeah,
Right.
that's funny.
So tell me a little bit more about, how what the path that you've come to through all of this.
The path that I took was that New York City was an amazing place to hear music, and there were clubs everywhere. But there was probably 5 or 10 that were really renowned for having the the stuff. So I would go down to the Village and I'd go to the Cafe Wah or the Bitter End or the Other End, or uptown I'd go to a bar called Home. A little down further from that was a place called Dr. Generosity's, and they all had open mic nights. And I used to hang out at open mic night because I wanted to play and do a song that I'd written. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a song, I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to cover somebody else's song. So I would go to Dr. Generosity's every Sunday, and one night, in walks a guy called Al Bonetta with 2 of his artists that he was a manager. 2 of his artists that were with him. One was a guy called Steve Goodman. Okay, he wrote City of New Orleans.
Oh,
okay.
So.
Then there was another guy who was completely unknown called John Prine. And John Prine had just gotten a record deal and was putting out his first album. And John Prine went up on stage and he started singing Angel from Montgomery was his first song. Sam Stone was his second song. And Hello in There. Sam Stone was, there's a hole in Daddy's arm where the money goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Jesus Christ died for something, I suppose. Anyway, and Angel from Montgomery started with I Am an Old Woman.
Yeah.
And I thought, here's a guy saying, I am an old woman. And his songs were so amazing. And I thought to myself, I can't get up on this stage later because I got shit. I got nothing. But I want to be that.
Yeah. I mean, even Bob Dylan, I quote him in my book saying that John Prine was like the Proust, or I forget who he compared him to, but that he was like such a good writer. I saw John Prine at the Troubadour in 1970 something.
So I got to meet those guys, and what happened after that was I'm playing there, and Richie Havens hears me playing, and he says, I really like the way you play. I'm doing an album, a follow-up album to Mixed Bag. It's going to be called Mixed Bag 2. Would you like to play on it? And I said, absolutely. It's my first kind of, real thing. And I went in there, and I didn't even have the Richard T. Bear name yet. I didn't have the T. Bear name. I had Richard Gerstein, because that's who I was. So if you ever look on Mixed Bag 2, you'll see that Richard Gerstein played on that. But I went up there, and the best of the best of the best musicians were on that album. And I was so nervous. And there was the engineer and the producer was this wonderful guy, and he just came over to me and he was like, don't worry, just breathe and feel it. You'll be fine.
And she later wrote about him. You wrote a song about Just Breathe.
Yeah, kind of, but
Yeah.
So that was kind of started to launch me, and then I got a job as a jingle writer, writing commercials, and I'd go to the Jingle House every day. And then I got another job playing with this band. I got another job playing with that band, and little by little, I started getting record dates and jingle dates, and people started getting to know that, oh, there's this guy and he plays like this and like that. Because I played kind of like Latin-y, kind of Creole-y, kind of New Orleans-y way, And then the guys from Kiss started hiring me to play with them, to ghostwrite with them, do things like that, and that all worked out really, really well, and that definitely launched me because all of a sudden I was in demand. I was getting record dates and
So you
flying,
are a
flying all over.
musicians.
Yeah,
A musician's
I
musician.
I was playing dates in London. I was playing dates in New York. I was being flown out to California, to L.A., this and that.
Wow.
I met Stephen Stills. We became really, really good friends. I stayed at his house. We started writing songs together. He says, well, we're doing a new album, and I got this song called Southern Cross I'm working on. You want to play on that? I said, absolutely. So here I am playing with Crosby, Stills and Nash and writing songs with Stephen Stills. So it was on after that. And then I got a record deal with RCA as a solo artist. And the album comes out, and I go out touring on my own, and I open for a bunch of bands all across the United States for a year and a half, and get to meet more people. And now I'm starting to get a little bit of a buzz. And Gene Simmons calls me up, and he says, listen, I'm going to fly over to London, and I'm going to do a solo album. You want to work on it with me? I said, sure. So I go over and do his solo album. He's dating Cher at the time. She's there with him. They go out to dinner. I babysit the kids. And we're all good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she says to me, well, I'm going to do an album. I would like to, you to work on it with me.
Wow.
And so I write her a couple of songs. One of them is really a standard ballad for her called Love and Pain. And, we got along like great. So my first album comes out. A song on it called Sunshine Hotel goes to number 4 worldwide. And it's a big, big dance. It's not a disco song, it's a rock song. But it's a dance song. And I love dance songs. And so I go appear at all kinds of places, Studio 54, all over Europe. And that launched me in Europe, and I get more albums to do for RCA. I got 4. And then I met a girl in LA. We moved in together, got married, and she turned to me and she said, no more music for you.
Oh.
I said, okay. We settled down, had kids. I went to work selling light bulbs for 20-something years. And the only music that I did was because I got sober a long time ago, was we had a musician's picnic. And every year I'd play in the super band. And we'd have great artists that came and play with us and raise money to put musicians into detox and halfway houses and things like that. Eric Clapton did it with us. Chicago, Three Dog Night, a bunch of well-known bands. So that was it. I took a hiatus for 25 years.
Wow. How did you feel about that?
Well, I ended up divorcing her. That's how I felt about it. That's exactly how I felt about it.
Wow,
And
but that's quite a sacrifice. I
said-
mean, like you were the music was in your blood.
Yeah,
It's
and
sort of like you had a transfusion or something to it.
yeah, and I started to wither, and after 20 years, 20-something years, I can't, I just can't do this anymore. And the kids were getting old enough so they'd be okay, and I just ended up filing for divorce. Got a place about a mile away from the house, and still raised the kids, and met another woman, and she loved music.
Thank God.
Yeah, and
world.
I'd come over to her house, and the speaker would be on 11, her turntable, and it was like a sound check when I went over there, and it was great, and we fell in love. I ended up leaving my place, moving in with her, and for the next 2 years, she nagged the shit out of me and said, you got to put a band together. You got to play in LA. I know who you are. I know the records you played on. I know what was going on with you because my ex was in your band 25 years ago.
It kind of settles it.
Yeah. So I put a band together and I started playing, and I got a residency at the Write-Off Room in Woodland Hills, and I put this band called Route 66 together, and we played every Tuesday night, and the place was packed, and the band was on fire. 3 horns out of the E Street Band, 2 of the members of Wings, you know, that kind of band. Yeah,
Wow.
it was amazing. It was like a Mad Dogs and Englishmen band is exactly what it was like. And I started writing songs, and Nina said to me, my wife, she said, you know, you got to make a record. And I said, well, nobody's going to sign somebody my age. And, you know, it's crazy. I don't have deep pockets. I'm not going to the studio. She goes, just write the songs. It'll happen. And I was doing a session at Robbie Krieger from The Doors, his studio. And he said, when are you going to make another record, Richard? And I said, I don't know. I gave him the same spiel. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the studio. You just pay the engineer. And you got it anytime you want it, as long as it's not in use. So I decided to cut 3 tracks. And I called up a friend of mine. And I said, would you produce this record if I made one? He said, sure. I'd done a lot of things for him. I was calling a favor. And we ended up making this one called Fresh Bare Tracks, because I had made a track in 20, you know. And if I open this up and I tell you who's on it, you'd be kind of wowed and amazed. I was. So Walter Trout, Stephen Stills, Edgar Winter, Tom Scott, half of the guys from the Wrecking Crew. I mean, everybody.
Wow.
Everybody in the world
impressive.
played on this.
And I see the Cab Calloway is one of the names.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
geez, I love Cab.
So I'm recording this album, and Nina says, I'm not feeling so good. We go to the doctor, and the doctor finds cancer in her, and it's stage 4, and they give her 6 months to live. And she lived a year, and I took care of her for that year. And towards the end, she wrote me out a note, and she said, finish the record, never cancel another gig, go back on tour, be happy, live your best life, and fall in love again.
Jeez.
And so I've honored her, dedicating this to her. In fact, the last song on here is called Nina's Song. And it was the first song I wrote when we got together, and she said, make an album. So
It's a great story.
It's a beautiful song. It's a great album. And in fact, the track that Stephen Stills and Walter Trout play on, which is called Give It Up, was a song that Stephen Stills and I wrote 30 years prior. Went to #1 in Europe. So I got a record deal, like out of the blue. And then they said, and then COVID hit. So we couldn't, do anything. They said, make another record, and I made The Way of the World. And
Let's show that to the
yeah,
camera.
I'll show the people that one, The Way of the World. And that's a song that's kind of Bob Dylan-y, because I love Bob Dylan.
I love Your Husband's Got a Gun. That's a great song.
Yeah, then I wrote a song called Your Husband's Got a Gun, which kind of speaks for
It's great. I
speaks
love
for
it.
itself.
I mean, I could dance to it.
Yeah, you can dance to it. Yeah, so these things came out. Walter Trout called me up. He said, would you go on tour with me? So I've been out on tour for the last year, and we've been in Australia, New Zealand, all of Europe, the UK, practically every state in the United States, and playing the great blues with him. He's an amazing player, amazing musician. Wrote a couple of songs for his record. In fact, there's a song on here called "Breathe," which is a really well-known song now amongst therapists.
I heard that, yeah.
And therapists have been calling me and saying, I've been playing your song "Breathe" to my patients, and it's no longer therapy, it's therapy. So.
Well, it's so interesting, Walter Trout. I have to say, I didn't know his name, but I just spent a whole 6 weeks in India, and staying with an Indian family, and the young man takes me to this concert in this gigantic, cavernous, underground, I don't know how to describe it, just rooms after rooms after rooms, and it's this blues show with Walter Trout and Guitar Shorty and Bernard Ellison and a whole bunch of people, and it was just wonderful. And then the next day, suddenly me and the band are all walking to our planes to go to LA and go back home. So that was my experience with Walter Trout. I mean, and so I love when he turns up on Nothing But the Blues, and KCSN, KJazz.
Well, things are moving kind of pretty strangely these days for musicians. We're not making money anymore writing songs because everybody can download them and stream them for free. We've got Napster came along, and then iTunes and Spotify and Pandora, and and
Django.
then Will Horia records. I don't know, and
I saw a post on Facebook that said, "Please buy CDs because one CD is worth 200 streams." And 5,000 hours, and it's so sad.
I've been selling CDs, and then people are saying to me now, well, I don't even have a CD player in my car anymore. They don't put them in the car. I don't have one in my house, so how can I listen to your music? And my record company that I'm signed to currently came up with this little card, which is a little plastic card with a QR code on the back. And what you can do with this little card is you can actually go to your phone and either tap it on the phone or take a picture of the QR code, and your album is downloaded instantly onto your phone.
And the musician gets some money from it?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's...
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this is the new 8-track, cassette, CD, vinyl, I guess.
Credit card.
This is the new way it's going to happen. And not only do you get the album, but you get the tour schedule for the artist.
Huh.
You get the bio. You get to send it to anybody else you want to. You can give it to somebody else. So.
You mean I could put that on my phone, but that same card would work on any number of phones?
Yeah,
Wow.
if the artist will let you.
And why? But the artist gets the money for it. This is the way.
No, you'd get it. The artist would get the money one time, but if they said, "I want you to promote me,"
oh, I see. So it's,
and let it go viral.
You can't get paid for it. Oh, yes.
But
You need a different card.
That's the kind. Yeah, that's kind of the way it's going now. Mm-hmm. But it's the way of the future.
I see. So it is a way of sharing it. But,
yeah. It's called a musical bead. Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's so. Here I am, writing a new album. It's going to be called The Book of Secrets, and it's all about people that have secrets, had secrets, or interesting folks along the way. One of the characters in the book, one of the chapters, it's no longer a title of a song, but it's chapter. It's called The Ballad of J.D. Salinger, which is the guy that wrote Catcher in the Rye. And it's all about his secret, which was he wants to be kept secret.
Yeah.
That
wasn't a secret.
That wasn't a secret, but it's
the only thing you knew about him was leave me alone.
Leave me alone, right?
I want to be alone.
And then the ode to Anthony Bourdain, who we lost a few years back, and a guy called Richard Russell, Bebo, who was a ground handler for arrives in air who stole an airplane and he wasn't a pilot. He learned how to fly on his flight simulator on his computer and took off and flew around the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound and did rolls and loops, and ended up committing suicide. He didn't want to land. An amazing story, and a lot of stories like that. Vin Scully is another character in the album, and so I'm looking forward to that. I'm just finishing all the titles for that one.
Wow. Well, now the times I've heard you play at the Write-Off Room and in some wonderful private home parties, it seems like you really like to play with the rhythms of songs, even well-known songs. You like to make them your own in a way, And so, can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, that sounds like it's your Caribbean background, your
Totally.
New York blues.
I like to play on that style is totally Caribbean, totally. I would call it a cross between Creole and Cuba. A lot of stuff like that, and like I'm writing a song right now about a bear. There's a bear that keeps breaking into houses and stealing food and breaking into cars. You know about this?
No, a lot of them did that.
Yeah, this one's like up in on the outside of Pasadena, or somewhere up that way, and they've nicknamed him Reggie. And Reggie's breaking into everything, and he gets shot in his ass with a hypodermic tranquilizer and then moved like 60 miles away.
That happened?
Yeah, and he comes back like a month later, and it's a funny bear. He's a really funny bear. Yeah, he's a smart bear. And like I imagined the game warden who takes him away and says, Reggie, why do you keep doing this? And Reggie turns to him and says, well, you got to risk it to get to the biscuit. So that's kind of.
Did you come up with that? That's
that's it. Yeah, I came up with that.
Wow.
So I'm doing things in that tempo. Then I got another one about a woman called Charlene, who watches. She watches soap operas all day long. And the husband comes home and he's breaking his ass, and she says, how was your day, dear? He says, well, how was your day? And she says, well, I was watching as your stomach turns. And he says, well, Charlene, you need to go out and get a job. He says, you better go out and make some bank because we're just about breaking even. And she says, all right, I'll think about it. Next day he comes home and she's still watching soap operas. And he says, well, what about it, Charlene? You going to go out and make some bank or what? We need some dough here. She goes, I'm coming up with a plan. And the third day he comes home. She's not there. About an hour later, she walks in the door. He says, where you been? She says, well, out making bank. Got a job. He says, you got a job in one day? She says, yeah. And she has a shopping bag. Turns it upside down on the table, dining table. About $8,000 in cash comes out. And he says, Charlene, where did you get that? She said, at the bank. We don't have that kind of money at the bank. She goes, no, I robbed the bank.
This is in your song.
Mm-hmm. So it's Charlene, the Yoga Pants Bandit.
Well, I look forward to your new album. I love funny songs. That's great.
Yeah, you got to have some humor these days.
Yeah, I mean, of all the wonderful Dylan songs, the ones that grab me, but the one that I love the most is, your leopard skin pillbox hat, because it's just so damn funny, or Lovely Rita, they're just so funny. They're just so, zany, and it's just always fun to hear songs like that, or Dan
Absolutely.
Hicks, Recently, I went to a concert, and it was, the revived new edition of the Kingston Trio and the new edition of Christy Minstrels, I think. Or no, I'm forgetting now. But then it was like Dan Hicks without Dan. But it was just so great to hear those songs. I'd seen him live so many times, and I just loved that music. And one day at a garage sale, I picked up a Bob Wills and his Texan Cowboys or something like that.
Texas Playboy.
And I thought, oh my God, this is where Dan Hicks got it from. I had no idea how he pulled together a little bit of the 40s and a little bit of kind of Moroccan. And so I admire that in you too, that you bring so many different kinds of elements to your music.
Well, I think it's important. I write stories. That's how a lot of my stuff are short stories that I just put to music.
That's really fun.
Like I have a song on here called Walter Mitty's Glasses. And you know about Walter Mitty.
Yeah,
okay.
I remember the film.
Walter Mitty was a guy that used to daydream. And so I wrote a short story, and it's all about a guy that goes into a antique mart. He goes up to one of the kiosks, and they got a lot of glasses there, and he picks up a pair of glasses, puts it on, looks in the mirror. Nah, that one doesn't work. And gets another one. Gets a third one on, puts it up, and he looks in the mirror, and there's somebody else looking back at him. He's handsome. He's got a tan, a little suit on, hair's perfect. Takes it off, and it's him again. Puts it back on, and he's this great-looking guy. He says, "Where did you get these?" He says, "I don't know. Some guy comes in. We buy them every month." He says, "Well, whose glasses are these?" He says, "I don't know." And he looks and it says, "Property of Walter Mitty." So I wrote the song, Walter Mitty's Glasses.
Well, before we finish, I do want to ask you what you think of how do you compute this music today, techno and EDM, where it's all synthesizers and the rhythms are just so static and constant. It's like you're in a factory. And how does you? In other words, I just don't see why
Not for
people.
me.
I know,
Not
but
for- it's
why
not-
do
it's not
people
for
like
me.
it so much?
It's not for me, because if you get high enough, you like anything.
I suppose that's it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it's, to me, I mean, it's a form of music, and God bless it. I like all types of music. And I've heard one or two DJs that were really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every once in a while I hear something that's interesting.
Yeah, but it's like when hip hop came out. I thought it was amazing, and a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And EDM is not doing it for me. It just I tried, but it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough human soul involved. It's all AI.
Yeah. I mean,
It's all
you can
AI.
tell when a person is
Yeah.
really playing the drums. It's not exact. It's they play with the rhythm. They play with the that point. Whether it's Charlie Watts or whether it's the Wrecking Crew.
I'm not down with AI for music. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is.
I mean, I know that it was Stevie Wonder and George Harrison who started to play with synthesizers and integrate the synthesizer into the band of humans. But now it's the AI is just taken over. I mean, they've replaced.
Nope.
And yes, the crowds that just love this.
Yeah, well, Mass Pablum. Yeah.
Belushi.
Yeah, tell me about how John Belushi influenced you to go get sober. In other words,
I played with the Blues Brothers on their movie album. I knew John when he was in a thing called Lemmings, which was off Broadway, and before he got a job on SNL, before there was an SNL. So he and I were friendly, and we'd hang out, and he got more famous and did movies, and he was on TV all the time, and we at the time there was a lot of cocaine going on, and I was doing a whole lot of it, and I had run into him, and we had partied a little bit over at the rock above the rocks at the Roxy, and the next day I was going to go over to Pat Benatar's house, so I left early, and of course he went to the Chateau Marmont, and he overdosed that night and died. And it was the next day, and I was just heard it on the radio, and I was just sick to my stomach, and I went on a run, just terrible alcohol and drug run, and I remember that I had to stop. I had to quit. I had to do something about it. I called my mom. She came out to to L.A. and helped get me into. And there were no rehabs at the time, so I went up to Cedar Sinai, and I was in Thalians, which was a psych ward, and I stayed up there for almost 5 weeks. Came out, started going to a lot of AA meetings, and got clean and sober. February 8 was my sobriety date, 1983, and I have 41 years now.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and
What a
the
turnaround.
Belushi, you know, it was really bad when he died. We lost a really good guy, and we've lost a lot of really good people to drugs, and you know.
That was a terrible loss.
Yeah.
I've gone to see the Blues Brothers subsequently. They play at the VA, and I was helping veterans with post-traumatic stress with my CDs, and it would be Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd would be doing
The guy that produced Fresh Bear Tracks and co-produced The Way of the World is Tony Bronigal, and you saw him playing drums that night.
Oh.
He plays with them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really small world.
Well, listen, this has been so interesting. I mean, your existence, your path, the arc of your life is so interesting, and I bet there's lots more to hear about how much the Caribbean influenced you. I'd love to,
Sure.
But I just think that we can think about more things to talk about in the future.
Absolutely.
But this was great to share with people.
It's a real good start.
So my website for my book is called youthplanet-60sbook.com. 60s written out. And
Say that again.
youthplanet60sbook.com.
Say it 3 times fast.
youthplanet60sbooks.com. My other website for healing is called Brain Body Bliss, and I really can see how all these things come together. And of course, I talk a lot about our generation, the generation of the 60s, the counterculturalists, the baby boomers, and you know what was happening then, and then what is happening today, and how many baby boomers are still so active and so creative and so dynamic and so dedicated to things. And so that's very interesting to see you at this time of your life just as creative as ever. And I find that is so true for a lot of people.
I will say that a lot of people, as they age, people are saying, well, do you still have the same kind of thing that you had when you wrote those songs then? And I will be honest with you, I'm writing better songs now. I know it for a fact.
I think that going around the sun that many times, just there's something that accrues. And we used to understand that. We used to honor our elders, you know, the sages, the wisdom of the elder years. And we kind of forgot that. And now I'm seeing it. You know, I'm feeling it personally, but I'm seeing it with these wonderful people around me. So I think there's something to that 7th decade. You know, it's like exciting. I mean, I'm more excited, and I feel like more of a kid than ever.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, T-Bar, thank you so much, Richard. I love it, and it was really great hearing your
Cats and Kittens, get the book.
Yes, and get the CDs, or get the new
download this from whatever streaming service.
The Music Bead. I love that name.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr.
Right.
Kathleen Rosenblatt.
Ciao.
Richard T-Bear. Bye-bye.